Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 10. Now on to the book of First Kings. So looking at chapters 2 and 3, where Solomon appears before the Lord at the high place at Gibeah, or maybe Gibeon, either way. One being is that the Lord appears to him in his dream sequence and then asks him, what is it that you would have me give you or do for you? So the title of this lesson for me, the new Adam, i.e. Solomon, humbles himself to Yahweh's wisdom, juxtaposing himself, of course, to the historical Adam who does not. So again, we'll get to this in more in-depth detail when we get to that Wednesday night session, but there's a few things I want to point out on this slide. In the center column here, what we're looking at are a few excerpts from Proverbs trying to answer the question, what exactly is the tree of life and of knowledge? We've talked about this in other sessions before, but to try to reiterate some of those things to make sure we understand that both of these trees, tree of life and the tree of the wisdom of good and or the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, are both sources of wisdom. This is not to mystify them in some way, as if to say if they ate from the tree of life, they're not going to receive eternal life. Clearly, the Lord bans them from access to it with a cherubim and a flaming sword so that they won't live forever. But they don't take from the tree of life that we have record of prior to that particular moment. So again, what exactly is it? Well, we're kind of left in suspicion if there ever was a question for us until we get to the book of Proverbs, and then we're told that happy is the man who finds wisdom because wisdom is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Now, you may think, well, that's kind of a comparison, perhaps, maybe something of a metaphor. But we are told when we go back, because this should force us to go back and take a second look at Genesis chapters 2 and 3, that we have the woman when she is looking at the fruit, now having a bit of a recalibrated sense of perception that's offered by the serpent to her. She's now looking at the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and she sees it, seeing that it is good for food and delightful to look at, but that it was desirable for obtaining wisdom. Now, why would that be? Why would she think that if she ate of this fruit, it would make her wise? Well, because of what the serpent said. And no doubt it would seem to suggest that there was wisdom to be gained from this. But the offer between every other tree versus this tree is it's okay for you to eat of every other tree. And I'm showing up with you every day to talk with you and walk with you and share wisdom. And that you are supposed to listen to what I say and be obedient to that and learn from that. And then as I define right and wrong for you, then you have to decide whether or not you will trust what I'm saying as being right or wrong. This is exactly what God is doing for Adam and Eve. However, when the serpent comes and offers the alternative truth claim, we see how they or what they acquiesce to. So, staying in Proverbs, we go back to chapter 1 here, and this is what we are told. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Again, part of the naming of the tree in the middle of the garden, the knowledge of good and evil. So, it starts with proper fear of the Lord, obviously, because fools despise wisdom and discipline. So this is how this journey for us starts with Solomon here in First Kings when the Lord appears to him. When the Lord asks that question, he says, Lord, my God, you made your servant king in my father David's place, but I'm just a youth with no experience in leadership. So he is a young man, certainly. Now, what experience he may have had in leadership, we're not aware of, but what he is clearly confessing here is that he feels too inexperienced to be able to lead God's people in the way that they deserve to be led, in the way that God has set them apart amongst the nations to be led, because they have a mandate to be reaching all the nations in some world changing sort of way. But Solomon, while he's watched his father David struggle with this idea, try to be as faithful as he could be it deal with his own problems, is a man that is following in his father's footsteps and living in his father's shadow, but is not his father, has his own personality, but wants to be as faithfully adherent, if not more so, than his father was. So continuing on in Proverbs, but back in chapter 3, where Solomon would say, trust in the Lord with all your heart. You don't rely on your own understanding. Don't be wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord and turn away from evil. So letting this help us a bit as we reflect more on Solomon's request. So he asked the Lord to please give him a receptive heart to judge or lead and teach the people. That's the idea. Remember, as we talked about in a previous lesson, judging comes with the connotation of teaching how to walk faithfully with the Lord, to live in light of his covenant arrangement with them, and to honor him and love him with all their heart, and to love their neighbor as their self in everything that they do, in all the business they transact, and all the relational intermingling that happens with one another. And that Moses is allowing the people to come forth and ask their questions and work through these rather hard things as it comes to these moments of dispute between one another. And that's the legacy passed on through all the judges and Samuel and, of course, the first few kings. Because the king is supposed to judge over the people. That's exactly what the people say when they demand a king in the place of Samuel's sons. Let him be the one who judges us, right? So let me have a wise heart to discern between good and evil, because who is able to lead or judge this great people of yours? So the question then becomes, why did this request please Yahweh, but Adam's actions in an effort to try to gain the wisdom of good and evil not please him? So clearly we understand that Solomon's actions were pleasing because this is what is told to us. Whereas the Lord asks Adam, did you eat of the tree I commanded you not to? One might say that Adam was taking the initiative here, and perhaps that was the test in and of itself, right? To see whether or not Adam would want to be wise so that he could actually execute the goal that Yahweh had pointed him towards with respect to bearing his image and, of course, reflecting his glory. And he would need wisdom in order to do this. But we understand from the context of the story, if God was walking with Adam in the garden and he restricted him from that tree, that God is offering that wisdom and, again, working to define these things for Adam so that Adam will then have to choose, what will he trust? Will he be wise in his own eyes, or will he turn from evil and, again, trust in the Lord with all of his heart, not leaning upon his own understanding? We know what Adam did and why the Lord was not pleased with that. Solomon recognizes he's not able to do this without the Lord's help, so he wants the Lord to bless him with that wisdom. So, returning to Proverbs chapter 3, where the teacher says, don't forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commands. They will bring you many days of full life and well-being. Never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you, but but tie them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, and you will find favor and high regard with God and with people, which is exactly what Solomon had already experienced himself when, of course, he hears these words from Yahweh. I will give you what you asked for and the things that you didn't ask for. No one will ever rival you with respect to the wisdom that you have, of course, until Jesus comes along. But with respect to Adam, because he chose to listen to his wife, and of course, inclining himself to his own wisdom, and he ate from the tree in which he was told not to, this was unwise and ultimately carves out the path of wickedness, which will always lead to folly, ruin, and total destruction. So just to sum up here, it's important for us to recognize Solomon is experiencing his Garden of Eden choice between two trees, life, knowledge of good and evil. Wisdom is indeed the process by which we come to fear the Lord and submit ourselves humbly to him and his guidance and the wisdom that he offers us as he defines for us what is right and wrong. And we will choose not to be wise in our own eyes, but submit to him if we want life. If we want death, then we will seize that knowledge for ourselves, attempting to also try to define it for ourselves and thereby suffer the loss of all things in the process of it. So hopefully that was helpful, and I thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next session.